Alright, well, welcome to another talk episode on Supercharged 454. Since it seems to be the more popular videos that I make, I guess some people had some questions about different things on the 454. This video is really just, are they practical, how hard is it to build, and the problems I have with this car, or problems that I ran into on this particular car. Now this video isn't a specific vehicle, what are you going to put it in type of thing. This is more just about the Supercharged 454 in general. So let me get the hood opened up and we'll take a look at it. And sorry about my camera work here. I have another video that I might release where I'm having the same problems, but basically I had to have a battery pack on this camera because the battery is so bad in it. This old camera's 5 years old, so it wasn't very expensive to begin with. But anyways, so as far as building the Supercharged 454, you know, if you have any basic knowledge of just, you know, we'll say tuning, carburetor work, timing, stuff like that, they're really not that hard. This 454 engine in particular I got from my father-in-law, and I really kind of wasn't known a lot about it other than it came out of a vehicle, got put in a truck, and the truck got crashed, and then it sat in the back of a Suburban for 20 years, something like that. But it kind of started out like that 454, which that 454 also came from my father-in-law. And maybe one day I'll get something done with it. It's an early 72 454, so it actually came out of an ambulance. But we'll look at that one day, because you know about as much as I know about it. I've never looked at it, and I've had it for over a year and a half now. So this was a stock 454, more or less. 2-bolt main, nothing real fancy. I put it into this car with just a 4-barrel carburetor originally, and that's how I ran it for some time. I get a lot of questions about the headers. I had to build the headers myself. In fact, I'm not sure which one of these Junkyard Javelin videos, I'm pretty sure it's the one where I showed a 454, putting the 454 in. There's some footage of me making the headers, and I do mean I had to cut, redo, rebend the piping to get around motor mounts, steering columns, etc. So they are something I had to make. And if I can make them, you can make them. That's kind of all it is about it. Those were shorty block huggers originally, and I just had to make them fit onto this car the best I could. But so this was a 454, just regular carbureted engine. The alternator and stuff was a little bit different. I had to get an aftermarket alternator bracket. I think that one is designed to go on that side of the engine, but I'm not sure. I have two different types, but as you can see, I had to build some bracketry and stuff to get it on there and get it to fit. The Supercharger came later. I had the Supercharger at that point for a couple of years, and it was originally going on a small block, but I ended up buying a big block manifold and pulleys and all that good fun stuff. I just decided to put it on there because it was brand new and I was sick of it sitting around not getting used. So it took me about a week to put the Supercharger on, and that was mostly just because, you know, working and everything. But it took me probably, well, I don't know, 16 hours of work to get it on and get it running. And that was my first time ever even fooling with one of these type of superchargers, so you know, somebody else might be able to do it a lot quicker. But if it's kind of your first time and you're just kind of putting it together with what you have laying around the shop, it's going to take you a little bit of time. The throttle bracket I just kind of made out of another throttle bracket I had laying around. I've got just a stainless steel Mr. Gasket throttle cable, and that seems to work fine. Obviously I've only got one single carburetor. I have the dual carburetor top, but you know, are they practical? I don't know. I don't know what a dual carburetor setup would be, but I can tell you right now with a 750 Hall A carburetor and the way this is set up, I get about 7.2 miles to the gallon. That's about the best I get in this car right now. Would two carburetors be worse? I don't know. We might find that out this next summer. So anyways, getting back to putting the supercharger on, I had an HEI distributor. Well, it's not going to work on a supercharger, so I had to end up buying a Summit. It's like a knockoff of the Mallory, ready to run. It doesn't have a think box or nothing, it's all built into the distributor, but I had to get a small distributor. I ended up putting out a lockout, so I got this timed. So the lockout is just how far the springs will go. I got this at 34 degrees total timing, and it runs at about 22 degrees initial timing. That's kind of where it likes to run, or at least idle good. Some people just lock these out at 32, 34, 30. They run really horrible until you get going, obviously, but I do have a little bit of timing curve in it, but not much. And literally when you're timing light, it barely moves. It does not have much of a timing curve, but it's enough to go from 22 to 34, and that's where it seems to run the best. I could probably put a little bit more timing in it. I don't know the calculations. It's a couple of degrees of timing per pound of boost, I believe. This only puts out about 4 pounds of boost up here, and that's because I got the bigger pulley set up on it. And that's kind of the other thing, you know, the practicality of it. If you're going to be running a lot of boost, that supercharger probably is going to wear out a lot quicker, and being driven on the street, probably not, you know, unless you just got money to do it and it's a lot of fun, then it's probably worth it. But practically, if you're trying to be practical with it, probably not. Just a normal 3 or 4 pound boost pulleys they come with is probably good enough. This one here, I do not believe it's a Teflon rotor. Again, I'm not entirely sure. I've never really looked at it. But the supercharger was about $8,000. That was with that was buying all the other parts to go to the 454. So that's about what I have into it. So is that practical? I don't know. But the weekend I put these on, this just had a stockish, like let's just say a very, very mild cam, RV cam in it. And I mean mild, it had no lope or nothing to it. And I put that supercharger on it, and it ran. It ran okay. It, you know, it definitely was not making as much power as it could. So this past winter I bought the supercharger cam for it and put in there, and that turned into a fiasco. And maybe I'll make another video about the cams, small cam diameter versus big cam diameter, push rod lengths, all that stuff, because this turned into a nightmare for me, but I did get it figured out. But putting this on a stock 454 more or less, it did run fine, and you know, it it just makes a lot of noise. It's really not that fast, and you're really not doing the potential of the supercharger, but it'll work. I don't remember what kind of gas mileage I was getting when I had just the normal cam and normal springs and all that stuff in it. I don't know that I ever checked, but I would assume it got a little bit better gas mileage. The other thing about these supercharged 454s is how much further the accessory drive sticks out. Depending on what kind of vehicle you're putting it in. I guess if you're putting it into an actual Chevy, I know a lot of those cars from the 70s had a really long fan shroud. You know, you probably got a lot more room. My particular vehicle I put it in, I had to do a lot of cutting and moving and stuff. The radiator actually used to sit out here on this flange, and I had to cut a bunch of stuff out and push the radiator all the way out to the front there with a core support, just to get enough room to get that electric fan in. Actually, kind of where that electric fan is kind of where the radiator was. It was literally touching the pulleys before I moved it. So that's another thing you have to keep in consideration is you start throwing superchargers on, you start extending out. You know, you extend out a good 4 inches, and people are going to say, well, the fan sticks out that far. True, but again, on a car like this, before those pulleys were there, the fan would fit in front of the water pump and the radiator would fit in its normal spot. So that's just one thing you have to kind of consider. Clearly this car is not a Chevy, it's an AMC, but the 454 did fit in here just fine. I make motor mounts to put them in, and that's an AMC radiator, and it uses the AMC cross members and all that good stuff. Again, there's videos on that. But my point of bringing that up is, depending on what kind of vehicle you're trying to jam this into, was it a V8 car, V8 truck, or was it a 6-cylinder truck or car? Because these are heavy engines. That supercharger is probably 100 pounds. And this was a 6-cylinder car originally. And I had to do quite a bit of work to the springs. They make V8 springs I could put on this car, but again, when you're just kind of building stuff with what you got, I had to put those little blocks in the coil springs to get this thing to sit up high enough so it wasn't dragging on the ground. And that's going to the problems I've had with this car. I really need to do something about the front suspension on it. I did have to put disc brakes on this car. I had drums, but they were 6-cylinder drums, and they definitely weren't stopping this engine very well. And that was before I even had a supercharger on it. The other big thing is again, 6-cylinder V8 car, what kind of rear end are you running? This had a posi locked 6-cylinder rear end, and before I even put the supercharger on the 454, it destroyed that rear end. So you know, those are things you got to consider. And that rear end I put in this Javelin was a AMC 20, which is their V8, their beefy rear end. It's like a 12-bolt Chevy, we'll say. And I put a Spartan lunchbox locker in it. Well, guess what? The old supercharger has made short work of that. I've got to pull that rear end apart because it's only a one-wheel burn. Sometimes it locks into both wheels, but it should always be in two-wheel burn, not one wheel. So, and I hear some clacking and some stuff out of the rear end. So, you know, I got to look at the rear end again. So that's being part on the practicability, you know. You're going to put this in your car, you can expect rear ends and stuff to be going out unless you can afford to just put a really nice beefy rear end, or you got a Ford 9-inch laying around that's already beefed up. But unfortunately I don't. Again, it's just kind of building with what I got. As far as the fuel system goes on these, I guess if you're running 2 carburetors, an electric fuel pump would be the way to go. I just have a regular mechanical fuel pump tucked down in there, and I've never had a fuel starvation problem that I know of, and it works pretty good. The biggest problem I've had is, like some other vehicles I've owned, these new fuel pumps out of the box are kind of junk. I went through 2 fuel pumps on this engine right away, and then I finally went to Napa instead of O'Reilly's, and I bought this $80 Napa brand, you know, just a stock fuel pump, and I've never had any issues. So, but the fuel system on these are pretty similar. I mean, this is running off the stock AMC 1/4 inch, maybe it might be 3. I doubt it. It's 1/4 inch or 5/16, but fuel line going to the factory fuel tank, and I have a big Summit fuel filter up underneath the car. I don't know. You can just see them. It's that silver thing right there. That's just kind of filtering the gas to protect the oil filter, but as far as what you have to do to the interior cars, that's all kind of what you want to do. I mean, I got all that crazy fuse stuff going on, but this car used to have a tunnel ram LS engine in it that was hooked up for nitrous and ran a computer and a couple different computers to run it, and that's kind of what the crazy fuse system I have going on is about. That's really just was for that old stuff, and that fuse system is kind of right there. But really, this engine doesn't require much to run at all. Literally, I need 12 volts going to that distributor, and I need power going to the alternator, and depending on what kind of gauges you got, I've got a mechanical gauge that I know is down there by the headers. I usually have it running up, but we all know it doesn't work anyways. But I have a electrical one there, and then I have a mechanical. Oops, let me get this to focus. Come on, focus. I have a mechanical oil pump. Can you tell that I probably need to get a new camera? Now hang on, let me see if I can get this thing I got it working again. Anyways, I have a mechanical oil gauge, and I have both styles for temperature gauges. But so you don't need a lot of wiring or anything. I guess you need wiring to your electric fan if that's what you're going to run. And then as far as cooling goes, this is just an AMC aluminum radiator, 4-row maybe. I guess is probably what it is. I've never actually had any overheating issues with this engine, except for when the fuel pump started going out and it started running really super lean. Then I started having overheating issues. But nothing fancy on the water pump. That's just a regular, I don't know if it's a truck or car, but it's just a regular water pump. And radiator with just one big fan on it. And again, I've never had any overheating issues with this engine. Some people say, well, superchargers will overheat your engine. They might, but that all depends on what the condition of your engine is too, probably. Head gaskets, water pump. Is your engine completely full of crap in the cooling system, you know? Luckily for me, this 454 was pretty clean. I dropped the pan. I had to do a bunch of stuff to this 454. However, I have never touched the heads. I've never pulled the heads off, and I've never looked at the head gaskets. As far as I know, they're original. And then if you're going to start running a bunch of boost, then you got to start running about worrying about your pistons and ring gaps and all that good stuff. So if you're trying to stay practical, which there really is no practical way of running a supercharged 454 as a daily car, I would say you probably stay on the lesser end of boost, especially if you're just driving it to go have fun and driving it, you know, just to go drive it, and you're not trying to be all, you know, Punisher and Road Warrior on everybody. So if you're just going to go have fun and drive it, the normal 3 or 4 pounds of boost is plenty of boost. Okay, especially if you throw the right cam and stuff, it does plenty of stuff. And in fact, after I put that cam, the right springs, and some more stuff into that engine, it started eating up that rear end. So that's the thing about them. You start putting more power to them, you're going to start blowing up more stuff. And that goes for the Turbo 400 that's in this car. It's been a pretty good transmission, but it's definitely starting to suffer from the Supercharger. So I'm going to have to probably pull it out and put a different transmission. Quite honestly, I'd like to put a 4-speed in this car, because this car originally was a clutch car. But finding a used 4-speed that doesn't cost as much as that blower around here is pretty much impossible. So until one comes around that's not insane, it's just going to be stuck with the 4-speed or the automatic. And that riveted panel there, that's where the shifter used to come out of the floor on this car. But and I'm thinking this car was just a 3-speed on the floor is all it was. It wasn't a 4-speed. It doesn't have the hump for the console and stuff. But well, anyways, that's my talk on the Supercharged 454. Are they practical? How hard was it to install? And I'm gonna say, if you've already got a 454 installed in your car, installing a supercharger isn't that hard, except, you know, cutting a hole in your hood and, you know, distributor and clearance and stuff like that. So I wouldn't say they're that hard to put on, and as long as you have some knowledge of tuning, like what jets and power valves and all that other stuff. Are they practical? Only if you design them to be practical, and that's very open out there about practicability. My opinion is it's practical as a Sunday driver and maybe a couple times a week, but to drive this car every day, it's not practical in any shape or form. Some people disagree, and maybe if I lived in the city where it didn't snow and it was somewhat warm all year long, it might be more practical, because then I wouldn't mind laying on the side of the road under the car working on it. But I don't want to have to sit on the side of the road up here and work on it in the mountains. So again, that's all depending on where you're at and how much you want to work on it, and if you can afford the fuel and all that other stuff. You know, and keep in mind the damage that this particular car has struggled with this supercharger, and especially the more I add into it as far as power, it definitely starts showing on the car. So, and some of you are just say, well, it's because it's an AMC and whatever. Okay, I don't know how much power this motor makes. It probably doesn't make a lot. And AMCs and this rear end came out of a 68 or 69 Javelin with a 390 in it and a 4-speed. Okay, some of those had 325 horsepower from the factory, and that rear end survived that before I even put a locker in it and rebuilt it with new bearings and everything. So I'm just saying, it's eating up this car. It's eating up the Turbo 400. So those are a lot of things you have to consider. And then, of course, on the other side of the coin, maybe if you have a lot of money and you took it to a professional and you didn't do it yourself, maybe they might be able to build it to where you could drive it every day comfortably and all that stuff. But I'm assuming if you're watching this, you're just trying to build this yourself, or you're curious about it. And this goes for any supercharger on any motor. My thought process is the more you start putting in on your engine superchargers, turbos, anything, the more damage you're going to start causing on your car, and the practicability is going to go away. It's like this AMX when it had the Supercharged LS. As soon as I put that supercharger on here, I started having nothing but issues and problems and stuff getting torn up and all that stuff. But on that particular supercharger, that was all fuel injection electronic stuff, and once we got that figured out, then the power started tearing everything else up, because that car on its best heyday ever had 750-ish horsepower on the dyno, and you know, when it was running that much power, it really started affecting the old AMX. So alright guys, well, hopefully this wasn't too boring for you. Hopefully this answers a lot of people's questions, and hopefully you guys will go out there and put turbos or superchargers on your car. I'm not trying to scare anybody away with this. I'm just letting you know, in the 2 years I've had the supercharger from stock to mild, you know, it's definitely putting a toll on the car. Am I going to put any more boost to this or soup this up anymore? Probably not. I might put the dual carburetors on it one of these days, but you know, I got a list of things I got to get done on, fixed up on this car. The rear end, transmission, and the suspension in the front are definitely suffering. So that's kind of where I'm at now. Used to be fine, but now I got to modify the car because I've modified this more. So alright, well, we'll hopefully see you guys in the next video, and as always, thanks for watching.